There is a yearning, there is a hunger in the society which we sense deeply for some place that I can be real, for some place that I can just be myself, that I'm okay the way I am, that I don't have to change, that I don't have to do anything. Now that we're in the digital age, all bets are off about what's going to happen with stress, because we've introduced entirely new levels of stress into our lives, the stress of information processing and the speed at which things are going. While you may not be able to change all the outside pressures and forces in your life, how you actually work with them and respond to them, you do have a huge amount to say over. But you have to be in touch with what's going on in your life, otherwise they'll just kill you or bowl you over. It's not the stress so much, but how you handle it within limits that is what really makes the difference. Now that we live in a kind of very complex society, the stresses tend to be somewhat different. The stress of whether you can make a living, or the stress of getting your kids through high school, or the stress of feeling like your job is being downsized, or you're no longer happy in your work, or you are having a hard time in your relationships with people. Those things can be very, very stressful. In some sense or other, stress is in the eye of the beholder. What's stressful to one person is not stressful to somebody else. So somebody might deal with pressure at work extremely well, and in fact only thrive under periods of pressure at work, whereas somebody else just goes to pieces under that same kind of pressure. Now, there's more and more of a fuzzy boundary between work life and home life, because your electronics goes with you home, and between the work week and the weekend, and between night and day, so that if you're not careful, you could be working virtually all the time on your cell phone all the time, or faxes or email or this or that, to the point where you're always reacting or responding to something else, and you have no time to actually be. So always doing. So one of the key dimensions of stress reduction and of the work of mindfulness is to actually recapture the being in human being, so that we don't, as the cliche goes, become entirely fantastic human doings, and in the process stress ourselves out enormously. But we're also isolated sometimes within ourselves. We're isolated from our bodies. We're isolated from good feelings within ourselves, that sometimes we feel like we're just driving on empty, that we're just on a treadmill and running and running and running. And sometimes, like when we stop, just like not even knowing what to do, because we're so used to and virtually so addicted to doing and to activity. Another feature of our society at this point in time is that a lot of the traditional structures that buffered us from the stresses of living are no longer quite so robust. So the family is under huge levels of stress that it didn't used to experience, in part because we're so mobile. So one generation may be scattered all over the country, the other generation is home. We don't tend to live where we grew up, so we don't have the supports of an extended family. Very often the same thing with church or with religion. The church used to, in some way, create a kind of community and a buffer and a holding environment for us to feel like we knew who we were and we knew where we were going. That also is not really serving in the way that it used to in previous generations. So that's why we set up the stress reduction clinic at the UMass Medical Center 20 years ago now, in 1979, to catch people who were really feeling the effects of stress in their lives often to the point where it is manifested in the form of frank diseases of one kind or another, or chronic pain conditions or whatever, which just compounds the stress in your life, and give them an opportunity in an environment for learning how to mobilize what we call our deep inner resources for learning, growing, and healing virtually across the lifespan. That we all have these deep inner capacities for healing, but we don't have the traditional structures for helping us to get there anymore. So in a sense, we have to develop them for ourselves.
Stress Reduction Clinic, Leslie speaking.
The beauty of a clinic that teaches you stress reduction is that it teaches you adaptive ways to deal with the stress in your life. And the first one is to notice it, to actually recognize the degree to which you're under stress and the various kinds of things that do cause us stress, and then learn effective ways of handling the stress, of coping with the stress, of dropping into deep states of relaxation and well-being from which you see differently. What we found over the past 20 years is that even though there was plenty of business for the Stress Reduction Clinic in 1979, now the levels of stress that people are crawling into the clinic with sometimes are just unbelievable, because of the digital age and the speed up of time and everything else, and all sorts of complex reasons. We see a vast range of people with medical disorders in our clinic, ranging from hypertension, all sorts of coronary heart disease, chronic pain conditions, a range of different kinds of cancers, anxiety, and all of the associated physical disorders related to anxiety and panic. I think the irony is that we have a hell of a lot more technology, but we have less time than ever for ourselves. And Thoreau would have really bemoaned that. And I think that some of his message is really integrated into the Stress Reduction Clinic and the work that we do with people. And it's in some ways the message of mindfulness. Walden is really a rhapsody about mindfulness. It's all about the value of the present moment and the beauty of living in the present moment. He called it the bloom of the present moment, and spoke about sitting in his doorway all day watching the sun move across the sky and listening to the birds and to feeling the wind on his face as it whistled through the trees.
I'm sure you're all aware that there are very, very salient limits to what medicine can do, and so part of this work is, as you know, to participate in our own well-being and in our own health and in our own journey of learning and growing and healing literally across the lifespan, and to engage in our lives as if it was really worth it, and to not shy away from emotions that are scary or periods of darkness where we don't have a sense of where we're going, and that we learn to step in and embrace the whole of that.
I was taking so much medication, and I couldn't cope with the stress of a busy life that our family lives, and I just was hardly functioning with my